feel like I'm on a one-person comedy show. So first, thank you for coming. Did everybody have a nice holiday? Thanksgiving? Yeah. And if I don't see you or run into you, I wish you all a very happy holiday in any way you choose to keep it or not to keep it. And a nice break at the end of the semester. We end somewhat late this year. It's the vagaries of the calendar. Let's hope it doesn't happen again. And I want to first start by thanking all of you. And the college has gotten bigger, and so it's hard always to keep in contact, and the college has gotten wider in its range. And so it's hard, despite the appearance of ease with the internet and Zoom and things like that, to keep in contact and to keep a flow of communication. So I don't actually mind emails. Obnoxious emails I'm not happy to get. Complaints I'm not happy to get either. But that's part of the job. I'm happy to answer them. So if there's something on your mind, apart from such a meeting, or suggestions, or questions, or I don't much like unsolicited advice. It's the worst form of conversation among human beings. Solicited advice, which this would be, I'm soliciting the advice, so it doesn't fall into the unsolicited advice department. So I really, this purpose of this is to provide you with information that you want to know. So I know there are people standing in the back. That makes me very nervous. There's so many seats up front, and nothing will befall you by seating up close up. And if you want to leave, it's not worse sitting up front and walking out. Trust me, as a musician, I know when people walk out the back of the room, it's as bad as walking out from the front. So, and I want to thank Colleen for organizing this. And so let's begin. There are mics. If I could see some volunteers to walk around with the mics, that would be great. I really appreciate it. And just raise your hand and let's get going. I am happy to answer anything you want to hear about and ask about. And it can be about anything, even something I know nothing about. But please feel free to start. I have some questions here, actually. Let me start with the questions I have here, because I think, Colleen, you solicited some? Great. So the last one that came in is about farming. I think it's a good place to start. So I think the question was, I got it this morning, do we have plans to expand, is that right, our farming operation? And the answer is that I don't think anybody knows. The question is what would be the point of it? So we now have the Bard Farm, which is the student farm. And they're, of course, concerned, because the rumor is, because we're building the dorms and the Myelin building on the other side, that we're going to move the farm. But actually, we have no plans to move the farm. Oh, it's only the dean. It's only the dean. What kind of ring do you have? That's a weird one.
Can you name the song, Leon?
It is anyway. I sort of like the old telephone ring, you know. So the opportunity does exist because we have the long-standing farm on Montgomery Place, which is farmed by farmers. And so if you now look at the entire property of the college, including the seminary, the old Jesuit seminary, I prefer to forget the existence of the Unification Church. That's all right with everyone. It was originally a Jesuit seminary and a very fine one, so we have a placeholder name for that campus so no one is confused, because the Livingstons that apparently built the magnificent house that once stood on that property named it appropriately, now that there's a movie, which I actually went to see, which is terrible, on Napoleon. They named their house for Massena, one of the great marshals of Napoleon, who died actually before the Battle of Waterloo, and Napoleon later remarked that if only had been there, he and Berthier, who were killed in the Battle of Wagram, two of the great marshals who weren't present at the Battle of Waterloo. But I went to the Lyceum to see this thing with my son. We were the only patrons. It was really fascinating. It's probably worth seeing, but don't count it as history. I mean, it's bizarre the amount of money spent on a film, which is really boring, among other things. Anyway, so since they named it for some reason we don't understand, after this French marshal, we're going to use that as a placeholder name for the campus once we get it integrated. But that land has maybe some possibilities for farming. The real question is whether to develop it into some kind of environmental agricultural program. That's one direction one could go in, or one could link it with the study of the environment. We were approached years ago to think about a veterinary college, for example, since Cornell has a kind of monopoly on this in the state. And we turned it down because it's a huge undertaking and very expensive. And so someone has to come up with a good idea for us to expand into farming. More than we do now. I mean, it's perfect now, it's perfect. And it's a wonderful project. It was started by students, and it just worked very well. And I want to thank all of you involved in it, some of you are, in how well it's done. And if there's a future, I mean, we're open to ideas about it. And there's the practical issue of funding it. And so, I mean, there's no particular answer to it. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, there are many, people have many ideas about how the property could be used beyond its primary purpose, which is to serve the academic program and the college's programs. There's been talk about, would that be a good place, the college, some periphery of the campus, for a retirement community? For example, many colleges have that. Dartmouth, Bryn Mawr, many places have very successful retirement communities, which then create income. But we're too early to have any kind of clear idea of what to do. Then there's a state of the college. Over the next 3 years, what direction are we headed? Upward. So the college, number one, I see Mackie is here, and so we're doing very well at admissions, very well at admissions. So this is a very conservative business, college admissions, and the key to it is reputation. And the college you can't earn a reputation rapidly as opposed to, let's say, in the high-tech business or in entertainment. You can have a meteoric rise to fame, and an equally meteoric disappearing act in fame. Institution of higher education is one of the most conservative businesses. So the places with high reputation are exactly the same as they were 50 years ago, 75 years ago, with very few exceptions. Those exceptions include Emory, for example. They include Washington University, St. Louis. Those are exceptions. They wouldn't be on someone's prestige list in 1950. Not even in 1975. So this is a glacially slow-moving industry. And finally, we actually appear to have gotten some real traction. And it's the result of hard work of the previous admissions team and the current admissions team. And so the college is headed for more demand for its undergraduate program. The problem is how to pay for it, because the percentage of families that can afford the sticker price of private colleges is declining. And we don't do something called merit aid, which is that we don't give financial aid to people who don't qualify. Most of our competition does. So if you earn $800,000 a year, and the institution wants you to bring in income, like a used car lot, or even a new car lot, they'll offer you less than the other dealer. So they'll say, we'll give you $20,000 in merit aid. The better institutions, which include ourselves and Vassar, and most of all the Ivy League, don't do that. And they don't do that because it's utterly unethical and corrosive. So you have a roommate who's working 3 jobs as a single parent on welfare, and you have a person who's extremely privileged and got a financial aid package from the college and brought a new car. And that is just corrosive. So, so the question is not the availability of enrollment, it's the ability to finance the enrollment. So colleges are more and more dependent on endowments and on fundraising, on philanthropy. We don't have any desire to grow, so there's no plan for the college to have a larger enrollment than it has now. I mean, that means in large scale. I mean, we're 1,800 or 1,900 students now. Could we be 2,100 students? Yes. But are we going to be 3,000 students? No. So, so that's one direction the college is headed. Let's see this question. Why do we purchase UTS? We purchased UTS because we were asked to by the community, essentially. And it was the right thing to do. And it turns out, you know, in every, we had declined, Tawn had looked at it, I have looked at it many times, we both looked at it, we declined because we originally, we always looked at it as potentially housing, and it's not appropriate for undergraduate housing. It would be too expensive to renovate. It's a kind of prison, dark, it's like The Shining took place. You know? And being an undergraduate is hard enough. You don't need to, I mean, if you want to be a monk, I get it, but not the sort of amenities, facilities, war that is in private colleges is intense. I think the dean was at Colby College, and at a dean's meeting and returned with a description of an athletic facility that, what did you call it? She thought she was in the Olympics, a magnificent kind of facility. We don't have that kind of thing, and in dormitories in particular. It's an important factor for some constituents. Don't always think that everybody comes to college to learn. Not in the United States. And so it's an awkward circumstance. You couldn't convert that building to a competitive dormitory. But now that we're looking at the building, which is 120,000 square feet, it's going to be a long-term process. It is going to be used for educational purposes, for students, for faculty, giving more space. And it obviates the need for us to build in addition to the library. So it's a cost saving in our capital plans. The staff wonder about our finances. I do too. So the reason you're wondering is because there is the illusion out there that the $500 million that was promised to us is something we possess. We do not. We will possess it when we meet the challenge. So our basic unendowed character has remained the same, which means there's always pressure on liquidity, there's pressure on expenses. The good news is that that pressure has an end point. In other words, there's, as they say, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're in the middle of a campaign. We've raised now, we have to reach $500 million in endowment gifts. We've raised $500 million, but some of that is for building, and the other are promised gifts. They're not cash. They're gifts that are irrevocable, but they come mostly when people die. I'm pleased to say that most people giving the irrevocable gifts are relatively old. So the likelihood that the money will arrive sooner rather than later is greater. But we don't have the money. We have to complete that part of the campaign by the end of 2025. So things will be tight this year and next year. And then it gets a little easier once the endowment match is met. And we appreciate everyone's cooperation. It's the mixture of inflation, the post-pandemic shift in the marketplace, particularly intense competition in a declining demographic. I mean, there are fewer college, 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds going to college. Absolutely, and a lower percentage of them is going to a liberal arts college. The state is in the worst circumstances. The people in the toughest circumstances are the branch campuses of state universities, because their enrollments are sinking very rapidly, and the legislature has no compunction in cutting. And there will be a large number of college closures in the next 5 years. So this is there's oversupply and weakened demand. There's some hope in the international market, but that hope is in very new markets, especially for an institution like this, India, Africa. The political situation has, in some measure, hopelessly complicated the Chinese market, except we do relatively well, largely in the area of the arts. But, you know, it's just a very competitive industry, and we will do fine. And the $500 million challenge grant has encouraged lots of donors, so the fundraising picture for us is optimistic. But the next 2 years, until we end the endowment portion of the campaign, will be difficult, as difficult as the past 20, 30, or 40 years. For those of you who are old-timers, things have never been easier. And so the college has always been a poor place, and there are some virtues to that, but I won't dwell on it. Remember also that we're in a not-for-profit industry, and that the country has been in somewhat of a changed spiritual place. People are less generous, less kind, less forgiving than I can ever remember. Less willing to listen and less willing to be philanthropic. Philanthropy in the country is on the decline. And the very, very wealthy are no longer motivated by the fear of their own soul. John D. Rockefeller gave the largest gift in higher education in the early part of the 20th century, was a devout Baptist. And he believed in somehow showing that he was among the elect, and both, particularly in the Protestant communities, the habit of charity or philanthropy deeply ingrained. The best givers have been those that have a connection to a faith community. And all universities and colleges have benefited from that. And that has declined. Selfishness, together with the unfettered marketplace, the narcissism of many of our politicians on both sides of the aisle. There is no moral leadership in the country that would inspire things like philanthropy. So it's a little bit of a harder landscape to raise money in. I think last year was the first year that Harvard University, sort of the kingpin of this industry in that regard, did not ask its seniors for a senior gift because they were afraid that the response would be so low. I don't mind fundraising. I do mind not getting the money. Most people are afraid to ask for money because they wouldn't give it themselves. You can never raise money without giving in relationship to your own income what you expect the other person to do. Long time ago, Deborah, was in 2001 or 2, Leon Levy wrote a check at a board meeting for $50 million. And the reason he wrote the check is because I reported that Chinua Achebe, who at that time was a member of our faculty, heard that we were hastily putting together a campaign in the wake of 9/11. We didn't know whether or not anything would remain the same. Right? Those of you who remember 9/11 remember that it was a very striking event. And, we held many open houses here with, frightened students and staff. No one really knew what was going to happen. So the then chairman of the board, Dick Fisher, and myself, we called an emergency board meeting, and we put together a number we thought we needed to raise to secure the college in the worst case. And we go to this meeting, and I'm sitting next to Leon, and Dick announced his commitment, which was $25 million, and I had to announce my commitment because he said, you can't ask unless you give. And he knew that, I'm a refugee and my wife comes from school teachers in California. We don't have any money except what they pay me, which I'm very well paid. So we made a very large commitment for us. And then he said, is anybody else committed? And I said, well, actually, Chinua came to see me. I talked to Chinua about this, just about the campaign, just seeking his advice. And he came over for tea, and he said, you know, I'm worried about this, and I'd like to commit to a gift to the college. I was taken aback. I said, well, it's very nice of you. You should no obligation. So he committed, this is 2001, $25,000. So I announced this to the board. Now the conversation keeps going, and Leon Levy leans over to me and said, did I hear you correctly that Chinua Achebe committed $25,000 to the campaign? I said, yes, yeah. And at the end of the meeting, he slips me a paper in which he says, I commit to $50 million. First, I couldn't read his handwriting, so it was a little odd. So I turned to Dick Fisher, who at that time was chairman of Morgan Stanley, and I said, you know what this is? He said, we just got a $50 million commitment. So I called him to thank him, and I said, you don't mind my asking, why'd you do that? He said, well, during the meeting, which wasn't all that scintillating, I was calculating what size gift I should give that would match Chinua's $25,000. And I realized I'm not willing to give that gift. No, he was, so the number came to be a number he didn't want to give. I imagine it was something like, 200 million or something like that. Shame. But he said, but he did say, I realized if he gives 25, I have to do something that's significant. Charity is only when you give something that is not a surplus in your own life. So he came up with the number of 50. The number of people I can think of who are willing to do something like that. This guy who went to jail, he's going to jail, Bankman-Fried, the crook. Do I have his name right? Yeah. It's amazing. He believed in something called, what's it called? Efficient philanthropy? No, it's called effective altruism. I mean, this is total nonsense, complete nonsense. But what's amazing is the very rich now, much more, feel they are smarter because they're rich. You follow me? If I'm so smart, why am I poor? Why is any of us poor? Why do any of you do what you do? If you're really smart, you would be Elon Musk. Now that is a totally distorted construct of values. The older generation believed that a scholar, a teacher, a nurse, a priest was their superior, not their inferior. That to be in business was slightly disreputable. And they had to achieve a stature by being philanthropic, supporting charities, orphanages, museums, universities, whatever it was. That sense of respect for life choices that each of you has made about how to live your life, that's not about money, doesn't necessarily command respect. I once asked a donor, I shouldn't have, but I did ask the donor, I said, just curious, do you think you're smarter than anybody else because you're so much richer? And I really expected him to say no. And he said, yes, I am. You're smarter than, Albert Einstein, smarter than Toni Morrison, smarter than Ralph Ellison. So the future of the college is dependent on enrollment, which brings, just because of the nature of things, less and less of the resources for the budget and philanthropy. And in both cases, we're very well positioned. Always remember that Amazon didn't make a profit in the first, 20 years of its existence. Takes a long time. Do we believe in what we do? Well, I mean, I believe in what we do. I think all of you do. Am I right? So the most important thing we do is we help human beings. Our admissions procedure is not to admit students who don't need us. We think we admit, and we can make a judgment that we can make a difference in someone's life. And so the fact is that service is what we are about. Everybody, no matter what you do in this room, the end point is the service to an individual at a crucial point in their life. And their experience here, can it make a difference in their sense of self and their relationship to their families and their communities? So we are in a service business that is not only building knowledge and skills, but also to some extent character, values. That's why the CCE, the Center for Civic Engagement, is so important. Poor Marienthal's work is so important. It is important that people develop a sense, especially post-pandemic, of their obligation to their neighbors and embrace that. That people develop a love of learning. You know, I think all this AI conversation is sort of odd because we're still the best machine there is. And we use so little of its computing power in our daily lives. I'm amazed how many exercise regimens there are to keep our bodies sound for what I view to be no evident purpose. If only people spend the time exercising their mind, we might be better off. So fascination with the machine to try to imitate what we should be doing at a higher level. I don't know why I'm stuck with films, but I watched the Oppenheimer film too. So I have an interest in the history of science and almost did my dissertation on Leo Szilard, who is a figure in that film. What the film doesn't actually show is the imagination and brilliance of the people that were assembled in the Manhattan Project. Many of them, whose work many of you know. You see Feynman there, Hans Bethe there, Kistiakowsky there. These people were unbelievably talented, immense imagination. You see Niels Bohr, he and his son both won the Nobel Prize. The capacity of imagination that humans have is wildly underestimated. We're in the business of cultivating that. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is we try to be contributory to areas of the culture and the nation that need help. So that explains the prison initiative. There was recently, Max Skinner wrote a very good piece in the Times. There was a very good piece by John McWhorter, columnist, African-American black columnist in the New York Times, about the Bard High School early colleges. That's an amazing contribution. We opened the third one in the fall. We hope to open another one in New York. We'll make 10. The prison education program is growing, and the micro colleges are growing. The Clementi program. So we do things in the public interest. And then we are real advocates of the role of the arts in our culture. Not the commercial arts, but the arts. We don't run after Taylor Swift, although I would hope that the next Taylor Swift went to Bard. But the past Taylor Swifts have gone to Bard, haven't been very generous. So I'm not sure that's the highest hope I have for the alumni. But people ask about Steely Dan, and they ask about Chevy Chase and Blythe Danner, the older generation. And Hollywood has never been a real source of income. Larry Hagman went to Bard, son of Mary Martin. That probably doesn't mean anything to anybody. But he was the star of a show called Dallas. Anybody remember this? Yeah. They didn't give us a dime. And then the international work. You know, we're in the midst of a terrible circumstance with the war between Hamas and the State of Israel. And so we're in a somewhat different position because we're the only American institution out of 5,000 universities and colleges that has had for 15 years a real partnership with a Palestinian university, an honors college, and a graduate program for teaching, training teachers. Courtesy of a collaboration we had with Sari Nusseibeh, which was organized by a wonderful person, David Harmon, and a great Israeli educator, and who has always believed in real justice for the Palestinian community. So have 15 years. We have more Palestinian alumni, more Palestinian colleagues than any American university. Now, the university is not a Hamas university, it's on the West Bank. So the international work, the Afghan work, there's several of you I see who involved with the Afghan refugees. We have the largest number of them, Ukrainians, partly because of Smolny. We have Russian dissidents. We have them also in Berlin. So the college stands for something. It's just not another liberal arts college. And most of you know that. And we believe in doing the right thing when there's a need. So we're looking to not imitate others, but actually enter spaces that need what we can provide. The new dorm, fencing on the North Campus. Can we see drawings? Tawn, can we see drawings? There's some renderings on the wind-blown sort of things, but we can easily, Colleen can find a way for those of you who are interested. They're very efficiently engineered and designed by Jamie von Klemper, who's a parent, actually, of a graduate. And there are 4 buildings, is it? 4 dorm buildings? 6 altogether?
4 dorms, 1 head house.
Oh, so 4 dorms. 4 dorms which they sleep in, then 1 student center kind of thing, yeah. New athletic facility. This is the highest priority for us after the dorms. So the sports program has done very, very well here. And I want to compliment David and the staff in the athletics program. They've done a terrific job, and they do well by creating a very positive spirit and a high degree of excellence. It took me a long time to relinquish my prejudice because athletics can be so overdone in the American university, so corroding of the university. Places where the most important person on the campus is the coach, and where there are surrogate places for professional sports. And then in the small college world, none of you would have any reason to know it, but a very good book was written by Bill Bowen, the former president of Princeton, on the insane expense race and rivalry between colleges, where none of the athletics is on an Olympic level, but the amount of competition and envy and historic rivalry is similar to Romeo and Juliet, Montagues and Capulets. I mean, it's totally insane, and it also corrodes the values of the educational institution. But we have a growing percentage of students in varsity athletics, and we need to have much larger facilities so that we can actually not only service the teams, but the larger community, so it's conceived as a wellness center. So we're looking for donors. So going back to fundraising, one myth, which I hope, and if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. Fundraising is very, very simple. It has nothing to do with the asker. It has everything to do with the giver. There are no good fundraisers. There are only good givers. I have never convinced anyone to give money for something they didn't already want to give to. So people will ask, why are we building this when we need that? And the reason is because we haven't found the person who wants to do that as opposed to this. Classic example, if you drive down to Blythewood, is this interesting, by the way? If you drive down to Blythewood, you will see something called the Edith C. Blum Institute. Is it still up there? Is it still, the name still there? Edith C. Blum Institute? Okay. What the hell is Edith C. Blum Institute, right? Trivia question. Does anybody know? No. There's no reason for anybody to know, because of course you know. So, yeah, she knows what it is. That's your business to know, right? So, Bart had a neighbor, the last estate before 199, that was the Delano family, and then was bought by a man named Lou Wasserman, came from a wealthy St. Louis family. And then the Sosnoffs owned it, and then now it's changed hands again. When I arrived, I went looking for people who could be benefactors, and this very wealthy elderly man who owned this mansion said, well, no, but he had a rich aunt who died, never married, and left a huge fortune devoted to the arts in the hands of a law firm in New York. Oh, why not? So I went down to see this guy. Really, he was a spitting image of a kind of a humorless, I came out of a Dickens novel. And I make my pitch because I was trying to trying to sell, it was a theater, to finish the theater that is now the film studio, which was unfinished when I arrived. And he said, no, I understand, Edith C. Blum's nephew wants me to do this, but that's not what she was interested in. So I said, what would you be interested in? He said, how about an art gallery? So I said, we'll build an art gallery, why not? So we built an art gallery, which we doubled as a little bit of an auditorium. We didn't tell him. The only requirement was that her portrait hang in the entranceway, which it still does. And we got the gift. The moral of the story is that I couldn't sell him what we needed but he wanted to give what they wanted. So the athletic facility is dependent on finding someone who wants it. And there are only two categories of people that we can think of who would want to build an athletic facility here, and those are graduates and their parents, and someone who lives locally who wants to be able to use the facility. And that's what we're working on. We are working toward meeting full financial aid, yeah. Now, this question, somebody asked, they didn't go to a liberal arts college, and they want to know, what do they want to know? I think they answered their own question. Yes, so the question is whether or not in the current world a liberal arts education is still relevant. So the simple answer is this: absolutely. The point of a liberal arts education is the ability to think independently and to also to go through the process of testing what one thinks to see whether it's plausible. So the way a scientist would. There's an episode of this Oppenheimer film when they ask the question of whether or not a chain reaction would ignite the atmosphere. And I don't know who he asked. He asked to calculate. I think Hans Bethe, who was a professor at Cornell, won the Nobel Prize, and he said almost zero, the chance are almost zero. And Oppenheimer said, well, I don't like that answer, almost zero. Well, the point is that going back and figuring out, and they came up with the same answer over and over again, but the ability to think for yourself, to use the rules of evidence, to listen to arguments, to change your mind, to do research, to improvise, to combine things, to take things from one shelf to another shelf because someone else didn't think they were relevant, but you find a way to make them relevant. To use the English language, to write, to communicate, to have a wide range of curiosity, to have an enjoyment of life which is through one's imagination, one's ability. That's what a liberal arts education provides. To look at the Hamas-Israel war and not stuck in slogans, but figure out why the issues seem so complicated and so intractable. To know what one is talking about and to feel uncomfortable about talking about something one doesn't know anything about. And that is the best possible set of skills in a world that looks like it's in turmoil and in great difficulty. And especially with the internet, which is a kind of a humongous, sewer of unreliable and misleading, and how easily we're manipulated. So given the power of the technology, there's nothing more important than a liberal arts college. Most challenged question to a liberal arts college education today is probably the integration of technology and science. So people don't graduate helpless. And I think that's a very difficult one. And also to acknowledge that there is a reason to think about history, to think about past behavior. One of the difficult things about this Napoleon film is that you don't realize that they've never presented why anybody would be interested in Napoleon. Not because he won battles, no. He transformed France, its educational system, its legal system. When he was in Egypt, now they show him shooting at the birds, the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But the fact is that he completely remade the city of Cairo. He was a tireless worker. He never is shown in the film reading a book. Incredible. He was an extremely learned, energetic workaholic. He wasn't simply, I think that the guy who played Napoleon thought he was Marlon Brando in the 4th episode of The Godfather. You know, that was sort of the demeanor. And he sat there and I said, why did you make a film about this guy? Anyway, so it's relevant. I'm sorry to go on. I didn't mean to, but yeah.
I'm struck that you've used the word university and college interchangeably,
Yeah.
seemingly interchangeably. In my perhaps flawed understanding, a university is a larger institution with a higher degree of complexity, graduate programs, global reach, et cetera. Is there some tipping point when there's a medical school at Bard West? You know, has Bard become a university? Just what's your thoughts on
So
that?
I was afraid somebody would ask this question. So many of you don't know, I know Mark is here. Classification of institutions is a little bit controlled by the feds, by the federal government. And they're changing the so-called Carnegie classification. Now, I was chair of the accrediting team of Wesleyan, one of our competitors, and it's called that's last spring, it's Wesleyan University. It has fewer graduate programs than we have, and fewer graduate students. So what's a university about it? Dartmouth College has a medical school and a business school, as well as a graduate school in science, and it's college. How do you figure that? Well, the reason is, I don't know, somebody at Wesleyan long ago decided it would look better if they were a university because they were so focused on Amherst and Williams as their competition that they could say they're only colleges, right? You play softball, I play baseball, you know, something like that. Whereas Dartmouth College, all their money comes from their loyal, high testosterone alumni. And they're rich as hell, and they realize if they change the name to Dartmouth University, they would piss off their entire constituency, right? So they're not going to change their name because their future is dependent on keeping that name as Dartmouth College. Right? We were a plain, simple liberal arts college when I came here, but we were dying, and there are too many such institutions. So we had to differentiate what we did. And one of the things we did is in small, elite graduate programs. CCS, the Bard Graduate Center in New York, the graduate programs in the conservatory, the environmental program, the MAT, all those programs. Small in number, but would differentiate us and then we expanded the reach, of course, to the high schools and stuff like that. Our worry, we have no desire to change our name. Not because the alumni are our major source of support, but because there is something about the undergraduate college that I think is a better atmosphere. University sounds pre-professional, it sounds very bureaucratic, it sounds imposing, less personal. Unfortunately, in Europe and around the world, college often means high school. And the use of the word is not uniform. England has the best tradition in that regard, so Oxford University is really, Cambridge, are made up of the great colleges. But the Carnegie classification avoiding getting labeled a university is going to be a task in the next couple of years to maneuver around avoiding being called a university. Now, there might be people, and this, I'm not religious about it, that might think it would be good. I mean, I get letters all the time addressed to Bard University because we have a PhD program in New York and stuff like that. So, you know, but for the time being, we want to duck the issue. And it's an inconsistent usage. I mean, there are places, there was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education about a place I never heard of that's closing. That's a liberal arts college. And I noticed in the picture, the entrance sign said XYZ University. Now, I don't know why they got, maybe there was some federal funding formula at some time that made it more advantageous to be a university. No. But there is a shifting ground in the classification system under our feet, which is the best thing to avoid, I think. But for example, there's a technicality, but the regents of the state of New York govern us. We're all part of a fictional virtual institution called the University of the State of New York, not the State University of New York. That's Albany, New Paltz. But the regents, Columbia is part of the University of New York, whatever it's called. And so we're all governed by the regents. The regents controls the degrees, right? So there's a debate in the faculty, right, about minors, right? Should there be minors? You know, I majored in this and minored in that. The problem with that debate is we don't have any majors. We don't have majors. We have concentrations because we only give 4 degrees. Social studies, the arts, literature and language, and social studies, what's the last? I'm missing one. Natural science and mathematics, right. The arts, language and literature, and social studies, right. So we got these 4 degrees. In those 4 rubrics, we have concentrations, which are like majors. So if the faculty wants to make a minor system, they have to use different language, because technically we don't have majors. So when a person puts on his resume or her resume or their resume that they went to Bard College and they graduated, the right thing to say, BA degree, concentration in economics. Now, many of them will write major, no one's going to sue them. But technically, we're not registered with the state of New York because in those individual majors, you lose all intellectual freedom because they're controlled by economists, controlled by physicists. So the actual silos, which have to be broken up for the pursuit of real frontier of knowledge, you get old-fashioned requirements in order to have a major in sociology, which may no longer be relevant. We're much better off with a divisional structure. Tenure is given not through a program or a department, but through a division. Hiring is done in an interdisciplinary way, not by a single department. So the classification is a dangerous game, and Bard has hugely benefited from sticking to its own traditions. The moderation, the senior project, the 4 divisions. There was a long discussion about changing the divisions, having a 5th division, no. We don't have a humanities division. That's good. And our social studies division is not called social science. So, I mean, being distinctive has its great advantages. The name of the institution is going to be discussed again at some point when they get to us. We will try to avoid it much as possible. Anyway, it's a very, very, very special place, and you make it special. And don't ever forget the amount of gratitude that I hope we share for each other's work, but that I share for your work and your loyalty. We've always competed effectively by the fumes, not by the gasoline. It's those extra fumes that make this a different place. I see it every single day. I saw it tragically when Tara Sheehan died, and the community reached out to Jim and Kelly, to the family, and it's still small enough that we can talk about being part of a community. And I don't think we ever want to lose that scale, which is why a lot of our growth is out of sight. It's not actually here in Annandale. The other growth area, by the way, someone asked, which is probably in the summer, I think you're going to see an expanse of the use of the campus in the summer, probably related to the arts, the new building and so. But that too is dependent on funding. So I appreciate your time. If there's a last question before. Yes, please.
Hi, so I'm an alumni of Bard, and I graduated in 2009, and then I worked for, I guess now 6 years ago, I started at the MFA program, and now I work for the Studio Arts program. And I also played soccer at Bard, so I'm excited to hear that there might be a new gym, wellness center. But I was also wondering, in terms of just the order of new buildings, if there's any, if, you know, the college is looking into a new Studio Arts building, or, because I know UBS, and I wanted to know maybe if you could speak about UBS and what's happening with that. And
well, I don't know exactly at UBS, but one of the biggest beneficiaries of the seminary will be the arts. There's so much space there that it will relieve the pressure in a very short period of time. Well, that's one reason we decided to buy it. I mean, your point is well taken. And the spaces there are easily, basically we're going to open up as much space we can, and so there'll be space for individual studios, for classrooms, all kinds of things, for varying kinds of installation art, anything people would like to do. So I already had a conversation with Stephen Shore. Photography is short spaces, and so there's a lot of space that will be available. The answer is yes. Well, or do we plan to build a new studio building? No, that, I think the seminary makes that redundant. However, the UBS, which is the issue of exhibiting art, among other things, to a public that's not internal, that's something that we still have to do. In other words, especially if you're in an MFA program, but I think for the undergraduates too, you want people to look at the art who are not simply your relatives. You don't want, that's why we built the Performing Arts Center as a public and a teaching space. It's fantastic to see young people. You know, I conduct Conservatory Orchestra. We're praying for a concert next weekend, not this weekend, the weekend after. The idea that the people in their audience are going to be people that they don't know, just people coming to hear them play, not simply proud relatives or friends. So, yeah, I think the arts are one of the biggest beneficiaries of the purchase of the old seminary. Again, the priority of what we can build is completely contingent on gifts. And most buildings in this college have been built by single donors. So the Stevenson Gymnasium. It was built by Charles Stevenson himself. And now, some buildings were built with supplemental donors, so Caden Ream, for example. They gave the lead gift, but others added to it. The Fisher Center too, but again, so the key is finding a lead donor for the facility, and what Deborah and her team and what we are doing are focusing in a priority way of which building to focus on. But we're all traveling salespeople, which means we have, we knock on the door, and the first thing we offer the customer is a vacuum cleaner. And they say, I already have a vacuum cleaner. And then they say, by chance, do you have a washing machine? I say, yes, I just happen to have one in the back of my truck. That's what we do. We like the story of the Easy Blum. So going to somebody and saying, listen, I'm not interested in a wellness center, but what other developments that you have? I'd like to help the college, and then you list what the priorities are, and they'll choose. I'm optimistic about the wellness center because it's such an important issue for so many alumni. So I would think that our best bet is going to be with an alumnus or an alumna who has the wherewithal and for whom either it was very important for them and they want to have better facilities, or they are, in retrospect, angry that we didn't have the facilities when they were there, right? Or preferably, they have a child coming. That's how we got a baseball field. Why do we have a beautiful baseball field? We didn't even have a baseball team. Because a very wealthy alumnus had a son who came to Bard, and he was a baseball fanatic, and said, I would like to do a baseball team. To which we said, well, that's a great idea, but we can't afford it. And he said, I can. And his dad insisted we build a baseball team, baseball field. It's a nice thing, right? Well, great to have a baseball. But I tried to talk him out of it. I tried to talk Charles Stevenson out of the gym because we needed a library edition. Thank God I failed. So since you're an alumna, if by chance any of your friends, no, really, it requires combing, combing the community. So thank you very much, and we'll do this again, and don't hesitate to ask questions. Tawn and Colleen are the best starting points, and have a very nice day.
How were your travels? Mom had lunch yesterday with Shelby White, who said, how did Leon respond? So I sent her your communiques, and she loved them, and she said she's going with them to NYU to show them how things should be communicated about Israel and Gaza. She was very pleased with them. I meant to tell you. When?